but not the TCs.
So I'm like, parking's the premium, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I am recording now, but just give me a second.
It's younger. There was this apartment condo. It's right on Chicago's. Historic is maybe.
Okay, stop.
Okay.
It's on.
Good morning. I'd like to call to order this budget committee meeting for Thursday, September 4th. Being noted that all committee members are here, along with Steve Summers and Dr. Brown. First thing is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I don't believe there's any public comments, so that brings us to budget update for the 24-25 school year.
Thank you, Mark. Rebecca, would you mind opening up that attachment, please? You see, Rebecca already knows to blow it up so I could see it. So thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate that. So what you're looking at is the treasurer's report that was presented at the annual meeting. So the audit process for 24-25 has been completed. There's a couple of items on here that I just wanted to call your attention to. The most important one is really the general fund. Now, if you see the change in fund balance, you see that that's zero. The reason why it's exactly zero is last January, the budget committee had a motion to have the Fund 10 ending fund balance end at zero and to allocate expenditures appropriately across various accounting funds. So given that motion, that's what we did during this audit process. So you can see the ending change in fund balance was zero. Rebecca, would you scroll down to the bottom for a moment? There's a note on there I wanted to point out. So if you see the second note, the ending fund balance for Fund 10 is equal to 10.5% of the Fund 10 25-26 expenditure budget. So as a reminder, the board changed the policy on fund balance to be a range from 10% to 15%. The challenge that we have, and we're going to get into this when we talk about some of Dr. Brown's objectives later on the agenda, is it was good for us to have a goal of zero because the last couple of years we had a negative balance, but we're going to need to start having a positive balance in Fund 10 or that percentage is going to continue to slip. Because on an annual basis, the Fund 10 following year budget increases. So if we don't add to the fund balance, the percentage is just going to naturally decline. So we'll come back to that when we talk about the topic of planning for future years. But I just wanted to point that out to you that as far as the big picture, we did accomplish the budget committee's objective of a zero balance. We are within the range of fund balance. Slipping backwards is a percentage. So we're going to want to maybe use this as kind of the bottom and then start working our way back up. And then you see the information is included for the other funds as well. The only thing that I would note that's probably, worthy of sharing is like when you look at the capital projects funds, that's just going to vary significantly depending on the bond issues that we had in that year, the construction drawdown. Ultimately, in the end, that's going to end up at a zero when this entire project is done at some point down the road. So it's not a concern when a fund balance at 40 either goes up or down. It's just naturally occurring with the construction project. So just wanted to touch base with you on that treasurer's report. Just clarify that Fund 10 ended at zero per the motion of the committee. And then we'll come back and talk about that fund balance issue a little bit later on the agenda. But does any committee members have any questions on any of the funds that are up there or any of the information that's presented?
Steve, I have one, and this may be a larger question that we answer later. Can you help me understand why there was a desire to have that fund balance end in zero? Because to our point in terms of, looking at our bond positioning and future financing, I would think we'd want to help increase that fund time balance to make it more attractive. So can you just provide a little bit of background?
Sure. So the last couple of years, our fund balance has had a decline not only in percent, but also in dollars. And as the budget committee was looking forward for the 24-25 school year, the thought was, because we've had a negative balance the last couple of years, let's get it to zero. Let's hopefully work in 25-26 to improve our contingency or access to other resources so that our fund balance would be positive. And kind of use 24-25 as the point of no longer being in a deficit,
Right.
being at even, and then the idea of moving forward from there. So I would call it more of a plan of just kind of getting it back to even as a multi-step process. And
Got
then
it.
really what Ally and I will be talking with the committee about is let's identify a goal for 25-26, some type of positive goal.
Sure.
Whether it's positive 250, positive 500, and just begin the process of moving back in the other direction.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Which brings us to planning for 25-26.
Okay, so for 25-26, Rebecca, would you mind opening up the timeline just to share with everyone what you want to scroll forward, Rebecca, right there, if you could make that a little bit larger, please. Just as a reminder of the remaining steps of the process for 25-26, Rebecca, could you scroll down a little bit, please? Thank you. In a couple of weeks, we're already going to be having our September student count occurring, so that takes place on September 19th. All indications are that we're going to be in declining enrollment. So again, that's going to be relatively new situation for our district. It's occurring to many Dane County districts. It did happen during COVID, but this is likely going to be the first non-COVID year that we've had a decline. There's definitely, I would say, economic changes that are occurring in the community that we are not seeing the growth with the number of students coming in that we have in the recent past. So we'll be taking a very close look at those numbers, sharing them with the board in the very near future. But we know as of right now, we're definitely going to be lower than what we were projecting. And so that's going to occur shortly. In October, we do receive the final property values from the state of Wisconsin. We do receive the final state utilization aid. And then at the end of the month, we're going to ask the board to make changes to the budget and tax levy prior to November 1st. And then we issue the tax levy certification in early November. Any questions about the next steps? All right, if not, if we could bounce back, Rebecca. Okay, so for the next agenda item, I invited Eric Cass from PMA. PMA is a financial advisors out of Milwaukee. I asked, Eric does live in Milwaukee, so we had to leave pretty early to get here this morning. I asked him to target like 8 o'clock because we're going to jump into some of those items under the 26-27 budget planning until he arrives. And then we'll jump back into this topic of tax levy options when he joins us at about 8 o'clock. So Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down to 26-27 budget planning. So we're wanting to have a conversation right now about beginning the process for 26-27. Dr. Brown did request committee review of the objectives from the board workshops that took place last year. Rebecca, would you mind opening that up? Dr. Brown, did you want to walk through these or do you want me to?
You can check this one, then I'll
Okay.
check the ones after.
So going back to board workshop 1 and 2, we're bringing back some of these conversations that occurred last school year. This objective was to establish long-term budgeting practices to address underfunded or unfunded budget priorities. As you know, as board members, we were able to address the first 3 items on this list in the 26-27 process. Thankfully, the state budget did provide additional resources to schools. And we have addressed post-employment benefits, which is now completely funded, termination benefits, which is funded at 100,000. And then the contingency was changed from 100,000 to 200,000. Remaining concerns include health insurance changes. We are not currently budgeting for changes that occur throughout a year for health insurance. In the ideal world, we'd either have like $100,000 line item for changes that occur, or even more funds available in the contingency. And then the last one is maintenance. As you know, we are funding capital maintenance projects through our referendum funding. At some point, a longer term discussion needs to take place about, will we be continuing that practice of looking at referendum funds for things like roofs, parking lots, et cetera? Or do we want to look at a longer term plan to really increase our allocation in Fund 10? So 4 and 5 still need further work and will be priorities as we enter 26-27. At the bottom, this was information we shared back at the workshop as far as the percentage of the fund balance. Now we know that 24-25 is 10.5%. So this is just a reminder. Our fund balance percentage is aligned with the revised board policy, but we definitely need to start turning back the other way. My thoughts related to that would be, I think there's an opportunity for the board to consider, let's say, a 5-year plan to get the contingency to like $500,000 and just keep adding 100,000 per year over the next several budget processes to get it to that point. Again, the goal would be that we don't spend those funds and that those funds could go into the fund balance. So then that end of the year balance would just naturally be positive every year. That's one approach to take, but as we move into 26-27 planning, we're going to come back to contingency and we're going to ask the committee, would you like to see us continue pushing forward to, let's say, 300,000 the following year? Health insurance changes, trying to get a line item for that. The maintenance issue is not as critical because we still have access to referendum funds. So I would describe contingency and health insurance as the 2 that probably are most in focus for 26-27. Maintenance will be more in focus probably in 27-28 or 28-29. But this is one that we're going to continue to bring back and help guide our planning for 26-27. Comments, questions, feedback on this one? Not Dr. Brown, you can take the next
I'll
slide.
take the next one. Still referring back to our February board workshop, we brought forth info in order to help Steve in the space of contingency and all the other areas that Steve just mentioned. Steve and I have had several conversations around, how do we get there with the current funds that we have? And so subsequent conversations, as I learned more in my first year, prompted me to begin to think about how we can think about now the plan for the future in terms of funding that or monies that we already have. So one of the practices that we have here in our district is person retires, resigns, we automatically post those positions and we fill them. And so for your consideration, we're and short of classroom teachers. So we know we have a policy where we have a teacher-student ratio and we will always adhere to that. But for some of the other positions, we want to be mindful of those positions from the standpoint of, is this a position that we really need to fill, or do we need to reconfigure that position to serve a greater need across the school district? So for consideration, where we're asking is for you to give us permission to now work with our directors and our principals to bring to us a justification for the filling of the position and remove ourselves from a level of automaticity, if you will. Person leaves, we post, we hire. So that's bullet point one, number one on this slide. And that's in the spirit of focusing on goal number one, where all of our buildings will significantly exceed expectations by 2029. So in my mind, or in our minds, the thought is when we think about these vacancies, filling or not filling, and if we do, how does that align with goal number one? So that's bullet point one. The second one is around paraprofessionals and for this school year, asking our administrators, and I will say with the exception of the middle school, as I learned that they only have one paraprofessional. So we would consideration for granting them grace because they only have one, but to think about through attrition, if there's an opportunity for the buildings to be able to manage with one less para next year, and we, with your consideration and permission, figure out how to reallocate those dollars in different spaces moving forward. And that's to the tune of about $180,000. And we'll rely on our administrators to come back and share with us what that would look like in their buildings, if indeed that's something that they can be amenable to. And then the third bullet point is, again, numerous conversations with Steve around we're very blessed in that we have an $800 teacher supply allocation. Over time, Steve has discovered we're not using all of those funds. So with your consideration to reduce that to 500, also understanding that buildings still have building budgets where teachers still need supplies. They still will have access to what they need to be able to do their best work. So those are the three here for objective 3. And if there are any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Working with the principals or building budget's pretty accessible for teachers though. Like if the intent is that if there's anything above that $500 that they would need, is it easy for them to requisite those funds, or is it?
I haven't heard any challenges around teachers not being able to get what they need. So that hasn't been something that I'm aware of where I believe our teachers know they can go to their, and they do it, right? They can go to their principals, in addition to other funding sources that administrators have in their buildings as well.
Okay.
I like the vision. I have a little bit of concern with the para concept, only in that through our listening sessions, I know they're a very valued part of our staff. And frequently we hear at the elementary level, at least, that we need more. And that being said, I also know that we probably have a higher ratio of paras in most schools in Benton County. So it's, I know it's a balance, but it's, I guess we just have to be sensitive to the impact, particularly at the elementary level.
Yes. We will be mindful of that and continue to hear from our administrators as it relates to what that could look like. So thinking about it this year, we get to 26, 27, if it's something, we know we rely on our paraprofessionals for prep time or for teachers to get their prep time and recess duty. But I'm cognizant of all that we rely on them for. So we'll just be mindful of that in the conversation for this year as we plan for 26, 27. And then the next one, Allie put together this chart. I asked her to put together a chart just to understand what carryover looks like. My understanding is historically carryover, principals have been allowed to keep their carryover in their buildings as it relates to maybe some big ticket items that they may need to purchase in their buildings. I thought taking a look at what the carryover has looked like over the last, Steve and Allie, we'll get the 24-25 data for you. But looking at carryover, just understanding as we cast a vision forward around thinking about the budget, are there opportunities for your consideration to think about a certain percentage of carryover that can be earmarked for continued increase in contingency, you know, whatever spaces that you would like for us to take these dollars and prioritize and move them in a different line. But looking at this over time, I thought this is one area, again, where we could, for your consideration, to take a look at carryover and take those dollars and move them into a different area as we work on these 5 priorities or anything else that we consider a priority. In my mind, the conversation as we work on increasing academic achievement is thinking about how what we're doing in these spaces relates to goal number 1. And I will probably continue to say that because it's very important and it's critical to the work that we're doing, that we're aligning all of what we're doing to make sure we're maximizing what we do have to meet the needs of all of our students and make sure they're proficient in things. So that is one for your consideration. And once we get the 24-25 data, we'll have Rebecca just upload this to board. So that's also for your consideration, given that these dollars we haven't maximized those dollars to the greatest extent as far as carryover has been concerned.
Just to share with everyone, in the September regular board meeting, so next Monday night, Ellie did upload the information here for 24-25. We just have to get it on this chart. So it's 965,000. So very similar to what it was the year before. And just for a little bit of history, you know, when I first arrived in Waunakee, for probably half the time I've been here, whatever remained in any budget balance at the end of the year became district funds. So as an example, if the district legal budget was off by 35,000 in a year, it was always covered by, let's say, the high school had 5,000 that wasn't used there, and Prairie had 3,000, and curriculum had 7,000. Across the district, those funds would come back and it would help us cover other line items that had challenges. But now, when we have a line item like the legal bill that has a challenge, the funds that are at the building and department level don't come back to the district. And so ultimately what Dr. Brown is proposing is a conversation around, instead of being 100% carryover, should we look at something like 10%, 20%, 25%, really coming back to the district to help with bigger picture district objectives? So she's not proposing like a complete switch back to the way it was before. It's more of some movement back towards, hey, if there's funds remaining, we have district objectives that we need to accomplish. We need to grab some of these funds back. So it's just communicating with all of our administrative team. What do we think that might look like? It's really a board input item for us, because at one point it was 100% back to the district, then it was 100% to the buildings. During COVID, we did grab some of those funds back at the district level, and right now it's considered 100% carryover. Probably coming up with some new process moving forward, I think would be helpful, so that the buildings can still plan across time. But as an organization, we can also plan and say, okay, this year we're having a challenge with X budget, but we're anticipating that 35,000 is going to come back from the buildings that will cover it.
Right. So Steve, anecdotally, not it, historically, each building sets up their own building budgets, but if we're looking, let's say, the Prairie School, a priority would be replacing X number of windows. Does that go through maintenance, or is that through the building budget that would be done? Carpeting, that sort of thing. Because I guess I'm looking at when you have almost $1 million carryover. I'm wondering, is some of that projects over the years that have continued to, maybe they were less than we thought they were gonna be, and then the budget's there, so this is more than a 1-year carryover, actually, some longer year carryover, and I also know historically, some principals have used this as an opportunity to prioritize something 2 years down the road. Whether it would be professional development in an entirely new area that the district itself wasn't doing, whatever it happens to be. And I think, how do we get to that point where there's that amount in one given year?
Sure. So generally speaking, this is not related to maintenance. But with that being said and done, there are principals or department leaders who do from time to time grab some of their carryover. There was a room at the high school that Scott Bauer was working on recarpeting, and the principal said, I just need this done. I don't like the carpeting that's in here. It wasn't on our capital projects list, so it was funded by the building carryover. So it does happen, but I would say that's a very small percentage of this. What does happen more and more is what you just described about 2 years from now, I want to send 15 teachers to this conference. It's $300 a piece. I'm going to partner with curriculum. Curriculum's going to pay for 5. I'm going to pay for 10. So that definitely does happen. And our building and department administrators do use this as an opportunity to plan across fiscal years. So I think there is a middle ground that could be proposed, especially as Dr. Brown's throwing up some scenarios here, where as a building, they know that they still have that ability to plan across years. But then we know as a district, if you look at like the 25% column, you still see that's a significant dollar amount.
Yeah.
We as the district then know it really becomes an added contingency, basically, if we pull back 25%. And so ultimately, in the end, I think being at 100% either way is not a good spot for us. I think the 25% column is entirely reasonable because it lets a building and department administrator plan moving forward, knowing that 75% of their budget savings remains in their department. And the 25% allows the district to plan as well, saying, okay, we have $250,000 here available to us for issues that potentially are occurring during years. So I like these ideas from Dr. Brown. I like the 25% personally, but I think any of this would work. But as we go into 26, 27, we just want to confirm for all of our administrative team, what's this going to look like?
So I understand the problem that we're trying to address with the 25%. I am still concerned about the creation of a culture of, use it or lose it.
Yeah.
And treating it like an FSA instead of an HSA, I guess, in the health benefit world. With the ultimate problem being that there isn't a clear way that the schools are spending their funds and the carryover being high. I'm not sure take back is the right solution. I think that it doesn't actually have to be governed by the board. I think it has more to do with really emphasizing the need for a strategic plan on how those funds are used and having that clearly articulated, and that can be governed by the leadership of the district administration to those schools without there having to be a policy or having the board overlook that. The pulling things back to the district, pulling things back budget wise, does there have to be a policy for that? Ultimately, they're either not being strategic, which is something that they need to be taught to do and be clear in their communication of how they intend to use those funds, or they're not getting the right funds, like they may be getting too many funds and we need to change it that way budget wise. But I think this is going to maybe not to quite the extreme of spend it or lose it, but it just pushes things back that way. So if it needs to be a 10% reduction, then it needs to be a 10% reduction because they don't have plans for those funds. Okay, then we do that, but
And the ask, and so just so for further clarity, so the ask to the administrators from our perspective could be, you have X amount of dollars, please submit a proposal or strategic plan around what you would like to do with those dollars. And I think from our perspective, it could be in relation to goal number one, right? That's, and I think that's something we can certainly manage at this level without a doubt. We could do that.
Because I agree, I don't like the user loser mentality, because I think people start to make poor decisions, right, with how they allocate it. The other concern is that we don't have a lot of movement in this fund. So if we are indeed trying to if, schools or the buildings are trying to indeed use it for long-term investments or budgeting, we have what, $250,000 over 4 or 5 years now? That's not a lot of movement. So are they using it? Do they know how to use it? Because it doesn't look like that's being done. Like, I could see if there's a dip where someone's utilizing it, like Prairie for new furniture, right? Or new tables in the cafeteria, or any of those needs, then I can see it, but it doesn't seem like it's being used.
It doesn't change a lot.
Right.
Well, I think too, from past budget discussions, there's been a concern about the multiple ways we log our professional development. Should all professional development just be directed through the district curriculum budget, and maybe that goes up, and then you ask for it. But I know it gives autonomy to the buildings to do what they want. So it's a fine mess, but I think it's kind of ties in with what Chris was saying about just being more precise in how they do the budgeting.
Mhm.
So that, okay, if, and I don't know how you, okay, so we have our district maintenance list, but we have this priority in this building, and it looks like it's not gonna make the building list. How did he get that need taken care of if it's a high building priority? I don't know how you manage it, but I know that's why some of that's there.
Sure.
And to your point, Steve, maybe there is a middle ground, because it's, again, less than $200,000 that we're talking about that's been spent down on this. Maybe it's a combination of, if you don't provide a proposal to the district about how you're looking to save this, right? Whether it is for, continuing education, or, whether it may be, other investment schools looking to make, we do take it back, right? So it isn't a use it or lose it, right? But you do have to provide a plan, because $200,000 over 4 years isn't a great use of this funds if it can be added to a contingency, or be, utilized, other ways. So maybe that's the middle ground, right? They got to submit a plan. Otherwise, it is, they do keep 25%, and then the rest comes back to the district.
Thank you. We'll take that feedback, and Dr. Braun and I'll come up with a plan. Rebecca, you want to go to the next one? And then this one, we have implemented, so just wanting to share with you that this has been very positive, because this has allowed me to see some things that I didn't see before. It's allowed Dr. Brown to see a lot of things that she didn't see before. And I oftentimes will see her going down the hallway saying, I'm going to talk to so-and-so because I got to figure out what this is, or I'm going to talk to. And so it's been good. I appreciated that the board was open to changing our policy on this. And we have made some changes with some of the renewals and other things that we've done, just things that had occurred naturally over time. And so I would say positive things are coming out of this. Dr. Brown, you're the one who's seeing the most of these transactions. Anything you wanted to add?
Yes, I agree. I live in that, the purchases come through Skyward. He's right. I'm like, okay, I gotta find out what this is about, and how this may, intersect with something that we're already doing. And is that something we can eliminate? Because we have a tool or a platform, just as an example, that can do what this other platform does. So it's been very helpful for me to be able to have those conversations and continue to work in the space of, do we have this because we need it, or do we have it because we've always had it? And that's the way we've always done it. And this is something we can do different in those spaces, trying to be, more efficient with our services and being more cost effective with how we spend our dollars in the district. So it's been great for me. They probably don't like to see me coming, like, oh. But I do ask questions to make sure that we're in a good place and space in as many areas as we possibly can. So it's been great.
All right, well, thank you for that feedback. Rebecca, we're going to jump back to the previous agenda item. We have a special guest this morning. Special, I don't know. Thank you very much, Eric. So Eric Cass is our financial advisor. So just to provide a little background, when the state budget came out, it became clear very quickly that there was a trade-off between resources being provided to schools and the local property tax levy. So we've talked about that a little bit. At the board workshop that we had in August, all of the board members had a chance to weigh in. One of the squares, or one of the choices that night was to just proceed with our budget as normal with what happened with the state budget, which would have been a property tax levy over 10%. None of the 7 board members really landed in that space. All board members expressed an interest in learning more about what some options could be that would be better for the community to lower that levy. I immediately started the conversation with Eric saying, can you please take a look at what options we might have available? And Eric jumped on it right away. I was actually there for a meeting. We weren't doing that, but then by the end of the meeting, Eric was already brainstorming some ideas. I'm like, this is great. I'm going to have you come to our September budget committee meeting. So Eric is the idea guy, and I'm going to throw it over to Eric, and he's just going to show you a little bit about what he's thinking and get your feedback on it.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity. As Steve said, so we've been working on this for maybe 6 weeks. If you get to the next slide, I think some of this information you've seen before. So in talking with Steve, this is kind of the flow, looking at your 24-25 revenue, really focused in on the tax levy in relation to supportive revenues here in the district. The second draft of the budget is up there, pulled that from your board docs. And then as Steve alluded to, the third draft based upon the biennial budget, which of course did not increase funding for school districts in relation to property tax offset, which we call equalization aid. You can see that your general fund is projected to increase almost 2 million. Keeping everything stable from your second draft, as Steve talked about, that would project a 10.4% increase in the levy. And so just kind of level setting on not necessarily the problem, but what strategies do we have available for you to consider in relation to any opportunity to get you back closer to your second draft of the budget from a revenue levy standpoint. If you get into the next slide, what I wanted to do, which I think is always a good idea, is just very high level review existing debt. So, debt has been issued for various capital projects through successful capital referendums. And so I just wanted to review that a little bit at a high level and then focus in on the opportunity that we want to discuss today. So some of these numbers are pretty small up there, which I apologize for. Yeah, that might help. But debt is issued all the way back to May 11th, 2015. You can see 2 issues there, one in May and one in June. If you get to the next slide, what we're looking at are further issuance. In majority of these, one was done in 16, but then in December of 2022, we started issuing debt in correlation to the successful November of 22 referendum. So one of the things I guess I wanted to highlight is you see at the top, there's a green bar. So all of your debt, almost all of it, except for the one up there on the left, is callable, which means that the school district would have the opportunity to prepay, refinance, or take advantage of lower interest rates when those issues become callable. So if you look at the one in the middle there, that one was issued in December of 2022. It is callable on 4/1/32. I think all of it is callable. So the highlights at the bottom would be the issue, the maturities that are callable, in that case in 2032. You go to the next slide, you see the final round of debt that has been issued in relation to that. The one on the right is a temporary borrowing that we're going to have to refinance in 2028. But you'll see that the other issue is non-callable. We did that because we didn't want to pay a penalty and had other opportunities for call features on your debt. You get to the next slide, don't need to spend a lot of time on here, but this is the structure for your repayment on an annual basis. I know some of it looks a little weird with 107 million. That might jump off the page, but that's planned for as a structure out for that to smooth out your debt. We'll show that in a little more detail as we go through this discussion. So in relation to the idea that we're bringing forward, if you go to the next slide, what I wanted to isolate is an issue that was done in June 8th, 2015. And that issue specifically was amortized over 15 years. So it matures in 2031. Under Wisconsin state law, you can issue for a period not to exceed 20 years. So when you think about issuing in 15 years, there is an opportunity to restructure this and smooth out the levy a little bit in the near term. It certainly does come with a cost and some downside to it, which we'll evaluate. But this is the structure as it sits today. So you can see the principal in green. It is callable as of 4/1/25. So we are in a period where we can refinance. We can pay that down early, which I know we're not talking about today, but there is opportunity with this specific issuance. So if you get to the next slide, the idea would be to push out some of the principal. So there lies some of the downside with interest expense, which I'll cover here in a minute. But as you look at this, some of the maturities, specifically in 2026, that on the prior slide were a little bit over 5 million, would drop by roughly 2 million to decrease the impact on the local levy in relation to debt service repayment. So what we've done here, and it'll come a little bit more clear in the following slide, is we've really built this strategy into some of the future refinancings that we're going to be required to do to create a more stable long-term levy for the school district in relation to debt repayment. You get to the next slide, super small, which I apologize for. I think what is most important, if you could zoom in one more time and then focus a little bit over towards the right. So on the far right, under the column Fund 39 debt levy existing plus new. So that looks at all of the debt service prior to the November 2022 referendum, as well as the structured and projected restructuring of debt and refinancing of two issuances of 99 million and 52 million. And what you'll notice there is there's a number above that solid line of 10,699,681. That was the levy for Fund 39 last fall, so the fall of 2024. What we'd be able to do through the idea of pushing out some of that debt is to drop that by 16.44% and get you down to 8.9 million, or roughly a drop of 2 million. You can see that the annual increase for 2 years would be set at 2.7%. And then I think one of the things that we wanted to highlight is that that levy would then increase by roughly 5% for about 15, 16 years. Historically, when we built this plan, we were right around 3% because our target was really net new construction, which I know you're all familiar with, and how we've strategically tried to apportion your levy to take advantage of net new construction. So that is one of the things that I wanted to highlight, is that by pushing out that debt, there certainly is a little bit of a downside on the future levy pressure that the district may feel in relation to debt service repayment, roughly that 5% target. You get into the next slide. So what I tried to do is highlight some of the positives and negatives. So the pros are near-term levy relief to hit the original 6% target. So I'll show kind of the conclusion of this by restructuring. Drops Fund 39 levy by that 16.5%. Now, some of the cons that I think we need to be aware of is this is going to increase interest expense by a projected 1.1 million. By pushing out principal a little bit further, you're going to be carrying that principal payment for multiple years longer. And on a projection basis, using current interest rates plus about 25 basis points, just to be conservative, it's going to be roughly that $1 million increase to long-term interest expense. That doesn't come all in 1 year, but it certainly would be spread out probably over the next 6 to 7 years. And then the levy projected to increase by 2.75 in 26, 27, and 27, 28. And then it would increase by just over 5% each year moving forward. Now that 5% is a little bit squishy because we don't know what interest rates are going to be when we need to refinance some of those temporary borrowings. And we also don't know the interest that we will receive if we do push this out a couple of years longer. So I just want you to be aware that our projection is roughly that 5% a year moving forward. If you get to the next slide, what I tried to do is kind of reset based on where you were at with what this would accomplish. So you can see on the far right is by resetting down to the 8941024, down from the 10.9 million, which was originally proposed as part of the third iteration of the budget that you've seen, would get you down roughly to 5.89%. Of course, that's not final today because we don't have the final numbers on the restructuring of that issue that I highlighted that was issued over 15 years. But we feel good that we can get you back down to that 6% by kind of restructuring that June 2015 issuance. So with that, I'd press pause and see if you had any thoughts or questions that you wanted me to answer.
A couple things I would add, Eric. So first of all, Eric and his team annually track this term called net new construction, which is the real property growth that's occurring on an annual basis. For us, it's been around 3%. So we know that about 3% of our total levy on an annual basis will be picked up by new properties for the first time. So if we can get to something around 5.9%, what that would mean for the average community member is their property tax levy for the school district would go up at a very similar rate to CPI. Very close to like inflation, because you can knock off around 3% of that total is going to be picked up by new construction. The remainder would be an inflationary type increase. And I do think that would be well received by most community members, having a CPI type increase as compared to the 10.4%. Eric did a great job of illustrating the pros and the cons, because it's always important to know, with every financial transaction, there's benefits and then there's concerns. The concerns would be the adjustments made to the debt service schedule. As board members, your real question in this space is, the state handed us a loss of equalization aid. It handed us the 10.4% increase in the levy. Many boards across the state are going to move forward with their state budgets, approved levies. I feel like we've spent more than the last decade really working with the community so that folks are aware of consistent property tax levy goals from the school district. And as a result, we do receive very few concerns to us about the property tax levy, which is why we brought up this idea of, hey, let's look at some ideas to knock this back down. But as board members, you're really looking at a discussion or decision between a short-term benefit for the community of getting that levy back down for our taxpayers in a CPI type range at a slight trade-off of an additional interest rate cost over time as the trade-off for this one. But as board members, we do know that all 7 of the board members wanted to explore some concepts here to knock the levy down. It doesn't have to be 589. I did talk to Eric about if we could get back to where we were at the second draft of the budget, that would be a good goal. But ultimately, in the end, given it's September already and next month we have to set the levy, we're looking for direction from this committee as to how do you want to proceed. We're not going to pull off a refinancing by the October board meeting. It doesn't have to be done by October, but we just need to know where we're going with the tax levy by the end of the month. So while Eric's here, questions from the committee on this concept, thoughts that you have, initial reactions?
The additional roughly $1 million in interest that's paid, if we were to pay down in a future state, something happens in the district and we if ends or something like that, and we have additional funds available to us, we can still pay down the capital portion of it and reduce that amount of interest. Or what was the amount of time that additional interest was happening over?
It goes till 20, We'll go till 2033.
Okay,
So that period of time is kind of spread out over 7 years.
yeah, so that's all contingent, or assuming we don't pay any additional capital. And in years past, Steve, we have, right, paid down that before.
Yeah, so the school board has looked at strategies in the past about debt service defeasance, refinancing, a variety of strategies. So absolutely, Don, that's a great point that what you'd be looking at is the current situation after the refinancing, but the board has just always continually monitored the debt service schedule to look for opportunities to make reductions over time. The other thing I'll point out is the next meeting after this one is the facility committee, which the facility committee is still going to be working through those savings on the November 22 referendum. At any point, the board may decide, let's say a year from now, to take another $1 million in savings from the November 22 referendum and basically ask Eric to knock $1 million off the debt schedule. So all of those ideas are still available to the board. It can be done at any time. And so we're not removing any future options, like you just said, Dawn, additional investments, prepayments, additional savings from the November 22 funds are all still on the table for the board to consider.
My other question is, what would it look like? I know that, you know, we were trying to align this with the new housing market, but if the housing market did take a turn right in the next year or two, and we don't have the growth that we see now, right? I think that's an important, reasonable worst case scenarios for us to plan for. What would that then look like and that impact be?
I mean, that's a very good question. And I think that's, you know, one of the cons that we highlighted or downsides to this. I mean, if we did not restructure this and push it out, and we kept you at the 10.9 million, for example, you know, we feel very good with the 2 refinancings we have to do for the 99 million and the 52, and we can keep you at that 3 to 3.25, right? And so I think right in there, pushing up to 5%, that's the downside if the housing market doesn't continue to grow here in Waunakee.
Sure.
Because, you know, I think it's always been set up on your trend for net new construction. This would certainly push it a little bit higher up to that 5%. So I think the downside is really that 1.75% increase in your Fund 39 levy. Now, this is separate from your general fund growth and what the state budget's going to look like long-term as well. But that's really, you know, to answer your question pointedly, that's really probably what I would focus in on is that 1.75% kind of change in the long-term levy. Now, I also want to highlight that that's not final. We hope that our interest rates are conservative. We'll be executing some of these and it's more in the 4.5 to 4.75. But I think that differential from where we've originally projected to kind of where we're at today from our projections is really that incremental difference to answer your question.
Okay, thanks, appreciate it.
And the other thing that I would add, Rebecca, could you go back for just a few slides? Eric, which slide was the one that had that whole payment that you were going to refinance? Because you want to explain that other years could be done as well.
Going up a little bit.
Yeah.
This one. So the stuff in green.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think to Steve's point, right, we're not taking full advantage. So we're, you know, as I highlighted, this was done in June of 2015. So it could be pushed all the way out to 2035. So I think there's two pieces to that, right? We're still trying to limit exposure on interest expense by only going out 2 years rather than pushing it all the way out to 2035. But to Steve's point, I think this is his point, is you still have an opportunity to restructure this in the future. So all of the green, you know, obviously in 2026, you're going to retire that debt payment. So that would not be an option. But the remaining years, if you find yourself after 2 years in a position where there's still upward pressure on your levy in the general fund and other things, you could push out to 2035. Same story, right? It's going to create more interest expense. It's going to potentially reset what your increase annually would be thereafter. But you do have this tool still available to you along with some of the other ones that Steve highlighted, whether it's equity in your proceeds account or, you know, additional levy that may come forward to retire debt early. So there's still opportunity with this in the future. We didn't take full advantage of it.
So what administration would be looking for is direction from the committee on how to proceed between now and the end of October. So as an example, does the committee want to see the tax levy returning to the 6% target or below that we had in the second draft? Does the committee want to set a different target, somewhere between 6 and 10? We're just looking for feedback so that we can proceed with planning and putting together the fourth draft of the budget. Administration is comfortable with the idea of 6% or lower, working with our financial advisor to ultimately bring back a plan to the board to execute that. But as board members, that's really the question, because Eric did a great job of identifying the positives as you're getting the levy down for the community, you're reacting to what's occurring with the state budget. The cons are we're stretching it out a little bit further and adding some interest costs. So as board members, is that a direction that you want to see us go? And if so, do you want to target something like a 6%? That gives us a guideline to work on between now and the end of next month.
I just want to put one thing out there for to consider is that, you know, being cognizant of other things that are going on in the community and the tax assessments, right? I think everyone's looking for a pretty significant tax increase next year. I think this work that we're doing is important to being good stewards of the tax money. But is this going to be overshadowed? You know, like this isn't going to be a huge tax relief to the individual taxpayer, right? We're potentially looking to take on, you know, new costs with extending our borrowing that we were just discussing. And is this gonna, you know, is this gonna get washed out?
Are we gonna lose the conversation thread in
Yeah.
lieu of how much the property values have gone up in our reassessment?
Right.
Do,
You know what I mean?
yeah. Related to, but not answering your question, do we know what the average assessment went up in the district? So last time they did a reassessment, which I think was just last year, unless I'm losing my mind, which would be true. We had the average for the village, so you could kind of determine for an individual homeowner, did the percentage of the value of your home go up by significantly than the rest of the properties in the village? And then that helped you determine if your individual taxes would go up or not.
Yeah, I haven't even brought this up with Eric yet, but you're right, Chris, there is anxiety in the community right now over the tax issue. So what happened, Eric, is there was our largest municipalities, the village of Waunakee, there was a village-wide reassessment. The letter that came with it indicated an average 24% increase in the property value. I know like mine was like 19%. What's difficult when that occurs is to separate out like the action of any form of government, whether it's us or the village or the county, from what's happening with an individual's home. But at a very, I'll call it high level, what I've explained to people is the 24% average in what happened with your property is what really matters, because taxes are being shifted amongst various properties. So as an example, if your property went up 40% and the average in the village was 24, your tax levy, your property taxes are going up no matter what we do.
Right.
We could drop our taxes. There's a redistribution of money occurring that's going from one home to another, and taxes are going up. The good news is most people are landing around the average. And if you're in that average range, it's not going to be an issue for you.
Mhm.
It's where you get away from the average on either end. If you're below it, you're going to have some savings. If you're above it, you're going to have some added costs. And that becomes very difficult for someone to understand. Did that added cost come from the district or the village or from the house?
Right.
And so, yes, there is an added level of confusion this year. But I would say our effort, if we do move ahead to move it from 10% to 6%, will be noticeable. And I would say the majority of homes are close to the average one way or another. So they won't necessarily see a reassessment impact
Mhm,
as much as they will what we're actually doing.
mhm.
But there are homes on either extreme that are gonna notice that reassessment occurring.
Okay. All right, thanks, Steve.
So is it fair to say this is kind of a one-time fix, right? Is that fair?
I think it's a one-time reset and then stability for 2 more years.
Right. So with that in mind, I guess I'm wondering, if I mean, the idea of trying to get it to 6 makes sense to me. I would support that concept. But if it's a one-time reset, could we lessen the long-term impact by incorporating some of our other resources? Uh, An allusion to our Inflation Reduction Act. We've got a resource there. Could we use a portion of that? Or could we use a portion of interest earned on our investment for a referendum project towards this versus some other areas, so that we're in combination, we get where we want to do, but the long-term impact might be softened. That'd be
Yeah, what Mark is saying is a variety of strategies together that the board can discuss. Let's say the goal is 6%. And then use a variety of strategies ranging from a refinancing, like you're seeing. The board could discuss the Inflation Reduction Act check that we just received for $1 million and Fund 49, the referendum savings, because we have time to work on that after the end of October. What we wouldn't have time to do is change our minds on the levy. So if this committee wanted to set out like a target of reducing the levy back to 6% and direct administration to work with our financial advisors to come back with a plan, that would be a motion that would be helpful to us. We can then put together a plan, and at the next budget committee meeting, we can throw out some ideas between using some of the Inflation Reduction Act funds or savings in the referendum. And then we can throw that out there for your consideration, because the more of those funds that we use, Mark, it lessens the interest rate cost that goes along with this. So I think that's worth exploring. And having a target from the committee of 6% then gives us a goal to work towards.
I do think 6% is a big target, kind of circling back, it's not supposed to be something repeating meetings anymore. Circling back to Chris's point, Monica, I think that engaging with Annie and you, as unlike other years where we maybe hadn't pumped out a lot of proactive communication about levy time, like we did for the referendum. And I'm not saying we go quite to that extreme on communication and community meetings and things like that, but some kind of approachable communication to say, hey, look, something along the vein of, we could have done this. We know that would have been impactful to your bill at the end of the day. We did these measures, kept it to this, and then trying to keep things stable in terms of the income we have for the, whatever that actually looks like. And clearly, I'm never taking over your job.
So you
I
have,
think that this is a year where we need to be more proactive and say, hey, we're aware of these assessments and just something approachable. Not to say that this presentation wasn't approachable, but without the conversation and without the presentation, I don't think these are documents that we can just throw out there and expect people to read and understand. So my ask would be, I guess, twofold. I agree with you that we should target the 6%. But also just wanted to emphasize that I think that this needs to be an area where our communication be more proactive and improves, just to help people's, because you know that there's going to be backlash.
yeah, so Steve, Annie and I discussed this very thing yesterday, and so we do have a November 19th date that we're preparing for, to invite community members to come, and we'll record it as well, but to invite community members for budgeting, informational session around, not only understanding how the way the budget came in this year from the state is new for us. But not only understanding that, but now that we have direction from you as it relates to what you would like us to do with regarding the tax levy to get to the 6%, that will be part of that discussion as well. We'll also record it and make sure we touch bases with Peter from the Tribune, to get that messaging out there as well. And there may also be a virtual option that we talked about. There are families who are unable to make it, but also doing an AM session and a PM session for those who might work different shifts. So more to come on that. And we'll provide additional information. But yes, you're absolutely correct. We do need to do that. And we will.
We need a motion to that effect so that you can put together the plan to try to get to that 6% level for the tax levy.
So I'll make a motion to provide administration the target to bring the tax levy back to 6%.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you for your time and Eric, thank you for driving.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
You bet.
Thanks for driving an hour and a half of traffic for a 30-minute meeting. Yeah.
It's early enough.
Okay. So I think we're ready for a motion to end, prior to the future items. Steve, I was hoping maybe at a future one, we could take a look at the Wrangler data and see year's expense, year's
Sure.
savings, and where we see us going
Sure.
forward with that.
Yeah.
Also having for energy related.
For energy, yes.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. So, motion to adjourn,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, the regular is reducing energy. We did hedge last year and I don't know that we saw, I might not have been in the meeting where we talked about ourselves in the hedging.